Welcome to another episode of Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. This is a show which highlights the importance of estate planning and why everyone needs to do it. And of course, the unfortunate consequences of what happens far too often if people have not planned. I'm your host, John Braddock, the author of Click Here When I Die, and the founder of My Life and Wishes, The Legacy Vault, an online planning and document storage solution created specifically to make things easier for those you love. Today, I'm excited to introduce my very special guest, Tim Semro. He is the founding partner of Semro Henry, based in Toledo, Ohio. His firm is top-rated and dedicated to legal excellence and client service with a focus on estate planning, administration, business, tax, real estate, and asset protection. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Tim. Tim is a graduate of Michigan State University and the University of Toledo College of Law. He has been practicing law for over 24 years. He is an Ohio State Bar Association board certified specialist in estate planning and trust and probate law. He enjoys meeting with clients, using his knowledge, experience to understand and solve complex estate planning issues. Tim continually strives to simplify the complicated, creating tailored solutions that are flexible enough to handle the unexpected. When Tim's not lawyering, he enjoys spending time with family, cheering on the Michigan State Spartans, and he is an avid golfer. Oh, and one other thing, Tim is an author, and we'll dig into that just a little bit later. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the firm that Tim has built. Who are they, the people? Well, you know what? They're moms. They're dads, spouses, grandmas, grandpas, Disney fans, golfers, tennis players, travelers, caregivers, and so much more. They're just like you and I. They're people. They understand what truly matters and who will be affected by the work that they do. The guiding core values that have been established at Semro Henry. One is batteries included. Every team member is willing to jump in and help to the best of their ability. They're an enthusiastic lot. They are self-motivated, diligent, reliable, and ready to work hard for you. They're client-focused. They understand that the client is the most important part of their business and the purpose behind everything that they do. And they believe that each client deserves the most courteous attention they can possibly give them. They're professional. Each day they strive for perfection, pay attention to detail, and most importantly, they always work with integrity. And work-life balance, so important. Their team members are encouraged to make time for their families and for themselves. This is crucial, and it's what makes everyone charged and focused during their time in the office. They only hire genuine, down-to-earth individuals, much like my guest today, Tim. Welcome, Tim.
Hey, that is a fantastic introduction. Thank you, John.
Oh, you're very welcome. So you're in Ohio. How are things up there today?
Things are going well. I mean, this is summertime. We've got great weather. Golf courses are open. I'm glad to spend a little bit of time with you, but if I'm not here, I'm going to be out on that golf course.
Well, I'm glad I can keep you off the golf course for a little bit because then maybe you won't have to give me as many strokes when we get together and play. Hey, you know what? The first thing I want to do is I want to congratulate you on your new book. Let me get that in my screen. Your Money, Your Way. And you've got the big poster up behind you.
Poster right here too, yeah.
You just released this, and this is such an awesome book. Folks, I have read this book twice now, and I absolutely love it. It is a fast read. It's got 5 amazing stories on estate planning that'll blow your mind, because it did mine. But they really identify some of the real life issues that a great many of us possibly will face and how to resolve them. So here's a teaser, folks. I want to encourage you to stick around until the end. As you know, my podcasts are not long. So stick around to the end, because Tim has graciously agreed to give away 100 copies of his book. And we'll be telling you how to get your copy a bit later in the show, but you got to stick with us. So you won't want to miss a chance to get this. But first, let's learn more about Tim and his new book. Hey, Tim, as my audience knows, I love talking about passion, the why behind what people do, what gets us up in the morning. Can you share your why and why you focus on estate planning and why it's important to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I think about that, I think where it comes from is so growing up, my dad was a Lutheran minister. So I was in the pastor's house. We called it the fishbowl because everybody's watching everything you do. But I got to see my dad help people. I mean, we would be in a grocery store, for example, and him and someone would come up to him and say, Pastor, I need to talk to you. And instantly I knew that meant I had to go wander the aisles for a while because they had questions for him. But it was really neat to see how he would help people and connect with people. When I got into college, I was studying accounting and tax. I had a strong tax background. And I took that with me to law school, which is kind of unusual path to take. Most people do political science or something along those lines. And it really just it helped me because then I had the tax background, but I still had this. I wanted this desire to connect and help people. And you put those two together in estate planning, and now I found my passion because now I can help people in a real way, and you can make a real difference in their lives and the lives of the people they care most about. I think that's what drew me there.
Oh, I love it. And
Yeah.
if you're a CPA, you wouldn't have such a good personality anyway. So sorry to all my CPA friends out there.
I,
I
I,
spent years, as you know, in the insurance business, and the big joke back then was how can you tell an extroverted actuary is the one that is looking at your shoes?
that's fantastic.
Oh gosh.
Yes, I just really enjoyed once I got to law school, I really enjoyed that. And then I was lucky enough interning. I got to intern with a firm where they let me in their estate planning section. And that's where I found my passion right there. And we've enjoyed it ever since. Here we are 24 years later. It's hard to believe.
That's amazing. Congrats on
Yeah,
the
thank you.
longevity and the firm you built, because I know you have a very large firm. You've got a big team of people that are dedicated to helping people avoid the nightmare that awaits. So that's why I love having you on here, because it just helps get the message out to the world. Because my mission is to get people to understand and have a plan. Period.
Well said.
So, hey, in your book, Tim, it starts out with the idea that estate planning is the last thing that anyone wants to think about, right? So, what led you to approach this topic through storytelling rather than conventional
Yeah,
guide of
yeah.
get this done?
Yeah, well, and because a lot of books have been written where they say, well, here's what you need. You need to have a trust, you need to have a will. They focus on the tools. And our thought was, well, when we're in these meetings with clients, a lot of times we tell stories when we have to get a complex concept across. And I thought, why don't I just tell stories using inspired by client events? Of course, can't tell actual client events, but inspired by client events and tell stories because then you can really see how does this apply to me? That's always I can tell you all day long about the IRS code, but how does that apply to me in my specific situation? And you can see in these stories and representative stories that I picked were, a family that has a cottage that they love and they want to they want to maintain that cottage for the future, but they run into issues with one of the kids doesn't live anywhere near the cottage, and one of them uses it all the time. You have another story with a special needs child, and the difficulty that you can have with that. Another one with a charitable plan as well, where they do some charitable giving, which is my passion. I also really like working on the charitable plans. But I can tell you my favorite story in the whole book. Every once in a while you run into somebody who's got a huge personality, fills the room as soon as you walk. The guy that was my mentor when I first started as an attorney, his name was Morty, and he was like that. He was from the East Coast, Brooklyn accent, and big personality. And they're just fun people to be around. Well, that is Ice Cream Bob. So Ice Cream Bob, huge personality. Everybody knows him. You guessed it. He's got an ice cream store. And through the years, the ice cream store has become the icon of the town. Well, a couple of years ago, his wife passed away, and he's starting to think about estate planning. That's what usually gets people to think about estate planning. Either they have a child or they lose somebody they love. And so he comes in to talk to me about his estate plan. And, like most people, when they get to the division, they say, well, let's just divide into equal shares. And that's what I said. Are we looking at equal shares here? And I can tell he's uncomfortable. He doesn't know what to do. And that's when I realized this is a unique situation that we run into a lot. He has one child who's in the business with him, has been in the business with him for a long time. He has another child who by the way, aside from being the ice cream guy, he has a significant amount of acreage. So he has a farm. And his one son has helped on the farm. He's actually built, and they do this. A lot of my clients do this all the time, my farmer clients. One of their sons will build a barn on the property and pay for it. Well, when it's affixed to the property, guess what? It's owned by the owner of the property. It's not, but they look at it as, well, no, that's, the son's property, but it's really not, it's dad's. And then the other daughter isn't involved in either. And so he looks at that and he says, well, first of all, with the barn, it's not fair if I leave equal shares, because isn't he paying for that barn twice? Because he paid for it to build it. And then if we have to reduce his amount by the barn, he gets that barn as part of his share. He's kind of paying for it twice. And that's not at all what he wanted to do, but he has no idea, how do we handle this? And the other thing he said, well, um, the ice cream store is worth quite a bit of money, and that's primarily due to all of the sweat equity that his other son has put into the ice cream store. And when I say ice cream store, by the way, they also sell hot dogs and food, and I mean it's a full operation, but they refer to it as an ice cream store.
When I read that story, by the way, which is like I think my favorite
It's
in
my favorite by far.
in the book, I got to tell you, I got hungry. And I wanted ice cream because
The
apparently this thing's
softies, as
been
he calls
around
them.
for everywhere. It was like, oh my gosh. So go
Yeah.
ahead, continue.
Yeah. So they've got the ice cream store. So he looks at it and he goes, well, how do I handle this? And I said, Here's a concept that people don't usually think about, but it's powerful in estate planning, and it's that fair doesn't always mean equal. And so what is fair and what's appropriate isn't equal shares in this case, because with the oldest son, he's paid for that building already. So he wants to give him that in addition to whatever he gets. For the second son, who's worked in the business for so long, he hasn't saved the way the others have, because he's put all of his effort into this ice cream store. He wants to give him the ice cream store, even though the ice cream store is not 1/3 of the value. And that's okay. And getting people to understand that that's all right. And the kids aren't going to be upset if they don't get an equal share. I mean, I'm sure there's times when they are, but most times they understand, hey, he's put all the work into the company, he should get that company. And so it's kind of a neat story, because we bring that together, where he realizes that uh, all this fret that he brought into my office, you could just see the weight on his shoulders. Once I brought up the fare is not always equal. It was like this weight was lifted off his shoulders. And I think I said in the book, he looks 40 years younger when he walks out of my office. And we see this all the time, because one of our core focus that we talk about all the time internally is we're delivering peace of mind to people. That's really what an estate plan is about, is giving you peace of mind. And you would not believe, people walk in and they've been thinking about this a lot. And it's usually been a while that they've been dealing with the issues that they haven't come to see me. So once we get that momentum going, I like to keep the momentum moving with them, and we talk through the issues. But what I like about the book is it kind of shows you that in just a few pages, it's a conversation. That a lot of people think, oh my gosh, I gotta get my will done, there's all these things I have to do. No, it's a conversation. We try to make it as painless as possible. We keep you in the loop so you understand what the process is, but it starts with a conversation. A couple of weeks later, we're probably signing documents. It's that easy. And you really see the effect that it has on people when you do that.
And I really love the way you wrote the book. So I mean, it's stories, but it's not just telling the story. It's the whole story. It's the conversation you're having with you know Joe Ice Cream. It's with the McInerney's. It's with the other people. And I mean, it's just really engaging. And it's an easy read. And when I picked it up, I front to back. I just didn't put it down because it just flowed so well. But my favorite quote out of the whole book, like you say, is fair doesn't always mean equal, because after reading that story, Michelle and I have 6 kids, right? And so
Mm.
growing up, it's like, when you're buying Christmas presents and stuff, all right, are we spending the same amount of money on the different things? And we know kids always fight and have disagreements and things. And when you get to this age, it's like, fair doesn't have to mean equal, but what will be fair to everyone. And when you get that put in place and you have that peace of mind, at least you have that freedom to at least believe that, when I die, my kids aren't going to fight over
Yeah.
things, right? And
Well, and I often tell people that, when you set up a plan, even if you're not sure, you're doing something like unequal shares and you're not sure if they're going to be all right with that. If you've set it up in your plan, they're going to accept that, because I've never seen them, blame. Now, sometimes they'll blame the lawyer. Well, he must have talked him into something, like that. But they never blame their parents, because they know that you've thought it through, and it's a good thing that they do that. So the other thing we did, by the way, in the book that I really liked was at the end of each chapter, I have a section called Essential Estate Planning Tools. So we talk about the tools throughout the conversations in the chapter, and then at the end, I kind of sum it up and go, okay, if you want here we talked about a trust, we talked about a power of attorney, we talked about a healthcare power, and what is that key concept? What does that mean? That it kind of sums up the whole chapter. But you're absolutely right. During the chapter, I wanted to give some of those conversations, because some of those little side stories that those are stories clients have told me, and I just think they're fun little stories. Like his whole thing on how did a pole barn, why do we call them pole barns? I'll let your readers or your listeners check that out when they read it. But
yeah,
just stuff like that, clients tell me, and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. It has nothing to do with the estate plan, but it's just an interesting little tidbit that I
yeah,
wanted
I
to make
love
sure
it.
was
And
in there.
for those that are watching us, this is the end of Ice Cream Bob's chapter, and this is what Tim talks about is just kind of a summary of the key takeaways from the items and the key concepts. So another teaser, hang on a little bit longer, because we're going to tell you how to get this, because it's an amazing book.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention is, and why I only put that at the very end of each chapter is I do think too many attorneys, the mistake they make is focusing on the tool and not the solution, not the people, not the problem that we're trying to fix. And so if you're, all day long, you're focusing on the tool, you kind of get a square hole into a round peg, or a round peg into a square hole type thing. And it's not always right. I'll give you a quick example, although I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this one, but there's a trust out there right now that you'll hear a lot of talk about. It's called a SLAT, a spousal limited access trust. And because the exemption, we have an estate exemption of $13.6 million this year, and it's going back next year to around 7.5. And because of that, lawyers are pushing people into SLATs to say, hey, you got to use your exemption, and using it up before the end of the year. And so they're going into the SLAT. But the problem they're missing is you got to look at the big picture of what the effect of the entire plan is, what we're committing to. Because while a SLAT will get you outside of the estate tax, there's another thing called the income tax. And so in the income tax, here's what happens. If I buy a share of stock at $1, now it's worth $10 and I sell it, I pay a gain on that capital gain. Well, if I give you the share of stock as a gift, you take that and you sell it, you're going to pay that same gain, because you get what's called carryover basis. So you have a $1 basis because I paid $1, and you get the capital gain. But if I leave you that in my estate, I leave you that share of stock, you inherit it at the $10 basis. You get a step up in income tax basis because it went through the estate tax system, is basically the reason. Well, if you put it into a spousal limited access trust or a SLAT, that's an irrevocable trust that's outside of your taxable estate for estate tax purposes. But for income tax purposes, you don't get the step up in basis. So all that buildup, here's the payoff. If you had a bunch of money and you gave, well, there's one other little point I got to put in here. To get, you might think, well, if I'm going to get the difference between 13 million and 6 million, I'll just put 6 million into a trust, and I'll take that top part that's going to go away, and I can use that up this year, and then next year I'll have 7.5 million of exemption. That's not how the IRS views it. In fact, I saw a really good graphic of this on the internet. they had a cupcake and they showed a cupcake with frosting on it. And they said the frosting is like that extra 6 million. And you want to eat the frosting first. But guess what? The IRS makes you eat the cupcake first. So if you give away 6 million this year, next year, when it goes back to 7.5, you have 7.5 minus the 6 you gave away. You didn't give away the top 6, you gave away the bottom 6.
Wow.
So to get there, you got to put a full 13 in there, is why I say this. So let's say you had a married couple and they had a lot of money. They put 13 million a piece in there, 13.6. So they have $27 million they put into that spousal limited access trust. Well, the reason they did it was to use up that 6 million exemption that they each had. So you have $12 million of exemption that you lost that you got to use, and you saved estate tax as a result. So you got 12 million times 40% is $4.8 million you just saved in taxes. But what if that $27 million they put in there only had a $7 million basis? It was investments and things. And you had a $20 million capital gain. Now, capital gains at 20%, but there's also a bunch of kickers when you're a high net worth that get it up to around 30%. 30% of $20 million is $6 million. So if I got you to save $4.8 million of estate tax, but then your family finds out instead they have to pay $6 million of income tax, we didn't do very good planning. So we have to look a lot closer, and you can't just jump into these tools. See, that's falling in love with the tool. So you say, okay, we got to use this tool because everybody's doing it. We got to get into a slat. That might be the worst thing possible. And so we have some unique solutions that we're working on with clients to kind of get the best of both worlds, or wait until the absolute time when we have to fund it, so we know we're going to get the benefit, and only to the extent that we need that benefit. But that's kind of the really roundabout long answer as to why did we tell stories and make and focus on the issues and the people, not the actual tools of here's what a trust is. Because I think too many times you can fall into that trap of just narrow-sighted and say, hey, I only look at the estate tax, and there's a whole bunch of other taxes out there and other issues. Because you could put the other big issue on slats, by the way, is divorce. So you got to be careful when you set those up. If the couple gets divorced later, it's a bit of a mess. So you have to look at the entire situation.
Yeah, I could imagine that would be really hard to unwind if there were a
And
divorce
sorry for getting in the
situation.
weeds for everybody. That was kind of but I get excited about this stuff. This is how, when we get into our passions, this is what we do.
No, I love it, and which is why it's important that people seek the guidance of the experts, to share the story, explain everything I have going on in my life, and have you ask me the right questions. What do you want to have happen? A perfect example. So I am the father of a special needs child, now adult. The chapter on the McInerney's who have a child with special needs highlights some pretty unique challenges. What are the most common oversights that you see in estate planning for families that have special needs children?
Yeah, and I think the one that and I kind of bring it out, it's kind of a difficult story the way it comes out, because I was showing how a lot of clients come in where they have a lot of stress just even on their marriage as a result of having a special needs child, because there's a lot of guilt involved when you have a special needs child for many different reasons. It's a complicated issue, but the one that I think they never expect is the guilt that they feel that they're not spending enough time with their other children, that they're focusing too much, or they're going to leave more assets to the child who has special needs because they have more care costs and things like that. And there's a lot of guilt there. And I think that one catches people by surprise. And unfortunately, I've seen it tear a lot of marriages apart. And so in that chapter, we talk about a family that came in and they were having a lot of difficulties. And it is difficult, especially, and I tell in the story, I relay how they had a kind of a little fight in the conference room right in front of me, which I've been involved in that more times than I want to admit. And it's awkward to me because this is something that you feel like this should be private, and they're having it in front of me, which means it's not the first time they've had that argument. And so we encourage people, because we're not just attorneys, we're counselors as well. So we say, hey, you need to talk to a marriage counselor, and get that out on the table and have discussions on it. Because I think that it's easy to look at the money side and go, okay, we have to set up a trust that's going to make sure it has keeps them eligible for governmental benefits, but can pay for supplemental needs outside of that, and avoid probate and all these different issues. But it's those soft issues, the relationship issues, that I think surprise people.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, being the parent of a special needs child, it is stressful, and there's a lot that goes on, and it does take its toll, on relationships and things, until you all are on the same page and you have, like you say, a supplemental needs trust and things put in place to know that, the child's going to be taken care of.
Yeah, and I was a little worried about putting that chapter in. I gotta be honest on that, because there's some conflict in that chapter with that family, and but I feel like it might be the beacon of light that somebody's looking for when they read that and say, hey, there is a solution. It may not be
That's
the solution that I came up with in that chapter for that family, but there's solutions out there and steps in the right direction.
that's what I found in reading the book. In all the stories, they're relatable, whether or not, I don't have a farm and my son hasn't built a pole barn on it, but it's still very relatable when you think about all the aspects of your life. So from a practical standpoint, for someone who hasn't started their estate planning yet, what are the first steps that you would recommend they take after they read your book?
Well, and I built this right into the book. So at the end of the book, we've got a QR code, because QR codes are really cool. But there's also a website if you don't like using a QR code, and you can go there and you can download this. So this is we call it a estate plan readiness scorecard. And so what this scorecard does is there's different things. Like the first line, it says personal balance sheet. And then you look at the different columns and you say, where do I stand on a personal balance sheet? Am I completely overwhelmed and I don't have any idea where my assets and liabilities are? Or do I have an up-to-date balance sheet? And you can score yourself. There's a 1 through 12. So you might be in one of these columns, but you feel a little better than the column states. So you can give yourself an 8 or a 9 instead of a 7. And you put that score down on the right column where it says before. And then you go through all of these and you say, all right, when I add this up, you're going to have a score that you see, and you'll be able to see when you're looking at that if one of the scores is much lower than the others. You got all 9s and 10s, then all of a sudden you got a 3 on one of the columns. And so along with this scorecard, I have this sheet that comes when you download it. I call it the estate plan readiness scorecard owner's manual. And the owner's manual tells you, okay, once you've filled that out, look for the row that you think you have to work on that's the most important. Circle that one. And then I say something interesting too. I said, and then hand it to somebody that you care about, a family member or a friend, as soon as possible. Why? Because they're going to help you with accountability and make sure you do something about this. So if you find out on here that you get to the line that says insurance checkup and you haven't looked at your insurance, whether it's life insurance, health insurance, property, casualty, all your insurances, you might have to talk to your insurance agent first. But or maybe it's your CPA you've got to talk to first, but something you'll pull off of there. And then, meet with your professionals, whether it's your CPA, your insurance people, your financial advisor, your attorney. And then when you're done and you feel like you have an up-to-date plan, there's a second column that says after, and you can score yourself again and you can see how am I doing now? And that kind of helps them zero in on action. So one of the things I wanted to point people to is getting into motion on something, because if we're getting towards the goal, we're better off than if we're just fretting over the fact that we haven't started. So let's do something. Let's talk to somebody. And so yeah, that's the first thing I would do, is to download that scorecard, take a look at it, and that'll start to guide you in the path of the estate plan. And it's really not hard. It's conversations. That's
I
all
love
it is.
that. I mean, and that's a great gift and it's a great tool. And for our listeners, when you get the book, okay, Tim's in Ohio, he practices in Ohio and in Michigan. Okay. So I'm in Arizona, so maybe Tim can't practice here, but it's fine. I'm going to download this thing and I go through, and you're not sure where to go next. Call Tim. Tim's an amazing human being. I'm telling you, he's a great guy. He, you tell him you've been through scorecard, you got some, challenges in these areas. I'm in Arizona, who should I connect with? Tim will point you in the right direction. Tim knows professionals all across the country. So
Yeah, and we've got a lot of contacts across the country. In fact, since we've been practicing so long, our practice is expanding across the country, and we've got licensing in many states now. I mean, we do a lot of work in New York and Texas, um, and a bunch of other states. In fact, I'm in the process of, ironically, getting my license in Arizona because I have clients out in Arizona now as well. So we just keep adding licenses in the different states because we keep expanding into the states because there's a need out there. There's a need, and I don't think it's being filled. So we're trying to provide at least information to start with this book.
Yeah, and I imagine you've got some snowbirds that come down here to Arizona, and I know that you don't hate getting out of Ohio in January to go to Arizona and hit a golf ball.
I specifically had a conversation with a client who, yes, he spends his winters in Phoenix, and I said, yeah, I mean, I can come out there anytime you want, January to March or April, and we can go golfing.
That's awesome. Say, all right, so let's make a short pivot, and then we're going to talk about how folks can get your book. But I want to quickly shift to work-life balance because we're human beings, right? And I know family and community are super important to you. So when you are not lawyering, what do you do from a family perspective? I know you love golf, and tell me about that green team up in Michigan.
Yeah, well, so and on the golf side, here's the one thing I will tell you. Two of my kids have now taken up golf, and so now the game that I've always had a lot of fun playing, they're now interested, and it's I'm having a ton of fun with it because I get to spend quality time, especially today with all the cell phones and the Instagram and all that stuff. If I can get them on a golf course for a couple hours, we're away from all that, so that's a lot of fun. It's a good time for me to connect with them. But yeah, I'm a Michigan State Spartan fan. Um, Growing up, my grandparents had season tickets for 50 years. So this was instilled on me for a long time. And early on, I mean, I grew up in Ohio. I was an Ohio State fan growing up, but they would take me to these Michigan State games all the time. And I love the campus. And then my wife went to Michigan State. Now I've got a son going to Michigan State, and then a whole bunch of our extended family have gone there. So yeah, we like to get up there, see the campus, tailgating, going to games. It's just a fun time to be on campus in the fall.
That's awesome. That is awesome. All right, it's time. We've made them listen to us ramble. So now the big reveal. So at the beginning of our time together here, we mentioned that Tim was going to give away 100 copies of his new book, and thank you so much for that generous gift, Tim. Tell our audience how they can get their copy.
So if you just send me an email, so the email address is books, BOOKS, at Semro Henry, which is SEMROHENRY.com. So books at semrohenry.com. We will send you a copy of the book. Or if you want to go to our website, semrohenry.com, you can find our email addresses there as well. And in that link that you get to the scorecard, we're going to constantly be adding other things into other content into that spot. So people will be able to see other things. They also could find me on LinkedIn. So Tim Semro is my LinkedIn. And one of the things I wanted to point out when we're on LinkedIn is we also post things there that we think are helpful. And this time of year is big. It's let's see if I can hold it up. This is the Semro Henry College Preparedness Plan. So this is a big list of all the stuff because I have a freshman in college right now. A big list of all the things you need to be thinking about if you're sending a freshman off to college. The biggest of which, and where we can help, is financial power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney. Here's when you'll find this out first, especially if you have a son, not a daughter. If they have a doctor's appointment that needs to be scheduled, they want mom or dad to call the doctor. And guess what? When they're 18, they're now an adult and they cannot do that. But if you have a healthcare power of attorney, and you can call and make arrangements, financial power of attorney. If you've got a bank account that you want to be able to monitor for your child and their name is on the account and you're not a co-owner, you got to have a financial power of attorney as well. And then we just have a bunch of other little things on here like, hey, make sure they have an Uber account set up. Make sure they have a, a Venmo or Apple Pay so they can, everything's paid with that, and they understand credit because they're going to be inundated with credit card applications when they get to college. If you have a 529 plan, now's the time to be looking at it. So we just have a whole bunch of little tidbits, and this has been helpful. In fact, my son was making fun of me the other day because I was going through and checking off to make sure I had done everything on the list that I created. And he's like, "That's your list, Dad." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's good advice." So yeah,
No,
that's on my LinkedIn. You can find that there, and I think I'm going to put that on the website as well.
that's a great gift, by the way, for anyone, because if you have kids that are going off to college and they're going to be going within the next 2 to 3 weeks to start.
Yeah,
um,
now's the time to do it.
this is critical because when I first went, I didn't know anything about this kind of stuff, and thank God nothing happened while she was gone. But for a couple of $100 to get some documents in place, that's huge peace of mind, right there.
Yeah, and the documents we're talking about from the legal side, the financial power and healthcare power, these are very basic documents, so very cheap to put in place. Um, and Yeah, also, if you happen to look at the book and you read the book, if you put a review on Amazon, I'd appreciate it. But a lot of people have asked, well, I like to listen to books when I'm out for a walk or I'm walking the dog or I'm going for a run. Are you going to have an audiobook? We are in the process of having an audiobook put together. In fact, it may be tomorrow that it gets done. It may be Monday, but as soon as that is available, I'll have that on the links to where that is on the website as well, or on Amazon, Apple, all the different places that you can find them.
Oh, that is awesome. That is awesome. And yeah, as I say, folks, feel free to reach out to Tim if you have questions, help in any way. I'm going to make it really easy. I have included all of his contact information in the show notes on how to grab a copy of his book. So we have that email, books@semrohenry.com there. You can grab that. I've got a link to Tim's LinkedIn profile. Go out there, follow him, grab a copy of that checklist. We'll have a link to his website out there, and then also a link to Amazon. So you can roll out there and check, and you'll be able to see when that book is released in its audio version.
Yeah, and one more thing. So if somebody wants to email me or call me, they're calling a lawyer, so they're wondering, are we going to get a bill for that? You're not going to get a bill just for calling and asking a question. We want you to ask a question. But I did have a client who said that they referred to their old attorney as old 6250 because every time they called to ask a question, they got a bill for 6250. We don't do that. We don't charge for phone calls.
Oh my God! I didn't even think about that, Tim. I've had you for like 35 minutes on here, and I'm not getting a bill, am I?
No, absolutely not. It's been a pleasure being on the show. I really enjoyed it.
Tim, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate your time, the work you're doing in the world of estate planning, and your book to help get people educated. And a huge shout out and thank you to my audience for joining us, as always. So again, as always, my friends, your life is your legacy. So plan ahead and make it a great day.